to give you a brief overview of this thing that we call the Vocation and Ministry Matrix. It's basically how the course was built, but the part that you need to see in this is exactly how the course fits together, because it does fit together. In this course, we started off looking at the very first thing called values. That's down here in the bottom of the screen in case you can't see it. Values. And values are important to us. The values are those things that we hold near and dear to our lives. They are the things that are important to us. It's the things that we rank above everything else. Those things come from our culture, from our social norms, from the way that we've been raised, and it's the things that we've developed over time that we look at and we say, we value that. That's an important piece to me. You might value liberty. You might value freedom. You might value things of that nature. Coupled with that is this next one, that is our calling. Because if we value our Christian walk, if we value right living, out of that comes a natural calling to live in right relationship with God. That is our call, to live in right relationship with God. The value, then, of living in right relationship with God is our call. Next to that is our mission. Our calling produces our mission. The calling, remember, again, and I know I've said this over and over, and I apologize for repetition, but repetition is good. Calling is living in the right relationship with God. But because we do live in that right relationship with God, we are then able to live out our mission with God. It's important that we get those parts right. Out of our values, the value of God, the value of church, the value of family, comes our calling to live in the right relationship with God. And out of that, then, comes the mission that He has for us. And that mission is to live out that relationship in front of God and in front of everyone else. So that's what we spent the first module on. The next module, we got a little bit tighter, a little bit closer together, a little bit more pressing on each of us, and we began to talk about virtues. How virtues are the things that God values. Those are the high moral standards, the standards that God has for all of us. When God says, "Be ye holy," He expects us to exhibit these virtues. The virtues that we talked about this semester, juxtaposed against the sins, faith, hope, and love, over against pride, anger, and gluttony. Virtues that God highly values. Wisdom and justice against envy and lust. Moderation and courage against sloth and greed. And we've seen all of those things played out in the headlines at times, it seems. But on these virtues that God has for us, these virtues that are the values that God rates as the most important, out of that comes our character. And you'll notice that these arrows work back and forth. They're not just all one way. They don't all go in in that direction, going up, but they work in both directions. Because the character also is a way of living out the virtues. The virtues are exhibited in the character. Out of character is what we see in people who have begun living this right relationship with God. It is this character, then, that we are living out how God wants us to live. Out of the character naturally flows morals, a moral standard, a moral way of living, morality. And we saw in the instruction this semester how sometimes it really comes down to just one thing, and it's that issue of pride. This is mine. It's all mine. And because it's all mine, we act on that, and that brings about adultery. That brings about all sorts of these different types of sins that we talked about, the pride and anger and gluttony. And then it comes from trying to hoard it all for ourselves. A moral life is one that is bred out of the character that is born on the virtues that God values as the most important parts of our lives. Be holy as I am holy. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But here's an interesting thing. Each one of these pieces are not alone to themselves. As we noted, they go back and forth between each aspect here. So values influences calling, which influences mission. But these also work the other direction, where the mission is based on the calling, which helps us understand what we value. But the other part of that is that they crosstalk. Our mission helps us live out a moral life. By living in a right relationship with God, we have good character, and our values give definition to what God's virtues are. And you'll see that they crosstalk all the way from calling to morals, from value to character, and from virtues to calling, from character to mission. All of these interact together. It's as if we could just draw a circle like that and understand that they all interact together. Finally, we have worked through this last column, beginning with vision. By having a vision, we are able to work out the call that God has for us. So the vision is actually connected to our call. But it is also connected to our virtues, and it works to enlighten our vision. All these things are interconnected. The vision is played out in our understanding of what God's mission is for our life and how we fit in His total scope of ministry. We live out His vision for our lives. The vision then produces commitment. We see what God wants to do, and we commit ourselves to living out what He wants us to do, to living out His message, which brings us to our ministry. So we have our vision, we have, or God's vision, we commit ourselves to that, and then comes our ministry. And again, all of these interact together. And we could probably say that they not only interact in this form, But I think you could probably say they interact this way as well, so that they all interact together. This is what it means to have a vocation of ministry. We are working out among ourselves, and in God's work, we are working out together what each of these pieces are, how mission and vision coincide to give us character and morals because of the mission that God has for us, because of our right relationship with Him, because we value that right relationship with Him. We're going to work to have a good moral life. Our character is going to reflect this right relationship that is based on the virtues that God has for us. And these virtues give us the vision and help us align ourselves with God's vision for the future, which then produces our commitment to Him, which then produces the ministry that God has for us. But the last piece is not just these pieces here. You've seen this, and we understand these all work together. But as we've done this past week, we've talked about holiness. Holiness is important. Holiness is the capstone, and the person that designed this class wasn't me, but he did a superb job by ending the class on the subject of holiness, because it truly is the crowning piece. Because of holiness, we're actually able then to value the right thing. Because of holiness, our calling, our ability to live out that right relationship with God is there. We're able to do that. Because of holiness, we then understand our mission is to protect that calling and to live out God's will in our lives. Holiness gives us an ample understanding of the things that God values. When He said, without holiness no man shall see God, then it's very clear then that virtues are huge in God's mind. And again, here's the interconnectedness. God gives us what His standard is, but He doesn't leave us there. If you listen to the sermons that I posted, that Dr. Oswalt preached, if you listen to those sermons, you understood that holiness in and of itself is not just God's standard, it is God's expectation. He said, "Be holy, for I am holy." That means that not only is His expectation that we be holy, that means that our character will reflect God's holiness, as will our morals. See, each of these are all interconnected. They are all linked together under this banner of holiness. Finally, holiness is connected by all means to this thing called vision. God's vision for the future. God's vision, His vision statement is that all the world should be blessed, that all the world should be touched. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. That's His vision. And by living out His holy life, we are able then to live out His vision. And by doing that, we commit ourselves to the mission, to the vision, and by committing ourselves, He gives us our ministry. All of these things interact together, and they help us have a vocation of ministry. They help us have a plan, a model for everyday life. So see, folks, if we are actually living a holy life, we don't have to worry about being the next statistic that makes its way onto the front page of the local paper. Pastor gone wild. Pastor caught in adulterous affair. Pastor caught with prostitute. By living out a holy life, then our morals, our character, our virtues are right. The virtues that God has for us. Our mission is kept intact because we are living out this right relationship with God. Our values are aligned with God's morals, which produce good character. And all of these come together to help us understand His vision and commit to His work and produce the ministry that He has for us. That's the basis. That's the basis for this matrix. That's the basis for this class. I trust it makes sense to you. Perhaps you already understood all this, and that's great. I'm glad you did. But for those that didn't, and there are always those who don't, for some reason, are not able to make the connection between pieces, I hope this helps to help you see how this class has flowed together and how it's come to this peak of holiness, of holy living. Folks, it's my prayer, my hope, that the class is more than just a series of information modules. But my hope is that it has provided you with perhaps an opportunity to draw closer to God, and perhaps even an opportunity to understand God's will for your life. May God bless you and keep you, and truly cause His face to shine upon you, and may He give you peace and rest, but as well, may He give you energy to do His work.